Hey, all you happy lost souls. The first thing I want to do before we go any further with this next video is I want to give a shout out and say thank you to everyone that's been subscribing. The channel is finally starting to generate a little bit of money. It's not coming close to breaking even anywhere, but I'll be able to put better content out. You can join membership for as little as $1.99. There's a bunch of different content that only members have access to. You'll get early access. Eventually you'll get one-on-one once the memberships grow. And if you're an early member, I will never ever forget your support. If you're an any kind of member or subscriber, I appreciate all the support. But if you're an early member on these days when it's just launching, that'll always be remembered. So what I really wanted to make this video about is the last video we saw some of those bizarre ancient megaliths left behind, and the way they work is that was a standing structure. Most likely it had two of your high lenules or minials or menhirs, they call them, the two standing stones, and then they have lentil or capstone across the top that they call a dolmen. You can look up different pieces of megaliths, but it probably looked like one of those henges at one time. And because that whole area was open field and pasture land, it kind of delineated the transition between water and probably somebody's boundary marker. I think they're really, really old just by the construction methods, but you can be fooled by this because it could have been something from the 1700s or colonial times. I don't think they would ever quarry stones that large, move them 2 miles and just leave them like that. That's megalithic. They chisel and quarry giant pieces of stone out like that the way they used to. So the techniques haven't really changed. You split the rock along a fracture and you get some holes down that fracture with some chisels, and you hammer down, you split the rock at the seam. It's just how large they were. And then they had holes along the face of that megalithic that rock to either hook some kind of attachment to lift it up or to move it. I don't know. Underneath there was that groove carved into it. That's either to help the mantle sit on top of the stones, or that was on the bottom there for an axle or for something used to transport it, some sort of roller, axle, or barge system. They probably floated it down the creek, I would assume. But really, that's not the purpose of this video, although it kind of relates, and so do all the sapphire tools that we find. A lot of them shaped strangely like just straight up picks. I have some in here. Let me see if I can get to them without going too crazy here. Let's see here real quick. I hope it's, oh shoot, I don't know what that was. I just stopped. It's not good though. Oh, if I figure it out. Can't get to that big pick. But I have some very large picks made out of the sapphire material, unless I move them. But we get these cutting tools made out of these really, really hard crystalline granites that have been heat treated. We get these large picks. We get these crazy wedges made out of corundum. Like you see, this tooth wedges could have been hammered down into a crack of granite to split. But I think a lot of these really hard drill bits, all these tools made out of corundum, like this massive saw blade made out of yellow sapphire. Why would you create a saw out of this stuff? Why? Because this can saw through almost any other stone. It's more robust than diamonds. It's harder than any of the igneous or metamorphic stone that they were cutting for these massive monuments. Now, there's a time period all over the earth where these monuments were being constructed by some ancient civilization that must have had related knowledge. And I think this goes back to Atlantis and the story of Atlantis. I think before there was a cataclysm, there was this advanced culture, maritime, that spread out along all the shorelines. They were building these megalithic structures. Everyone around the world, every country, every culture, even separated by oceans. We're talking about Japan, the Mediterranean, England, ancient South America, even spots in Montana, spots up along in the Arctic, spots in ancient Russia, spots across Korea and Mongolia. All over the world, some culture was using this megalithic construction technique known as cycloptic masonry. And this masonry, huge blocks that almost look like they were melted together. And later on, this video is going to kind of transition into more like a slideshow with some pictures and some information on my theories on how they shaped these stones in this polygonal masonry that was so advanced that you could barely slip paper through the seams. And it almost looks like it was melted together, the stone. There's been so many theories, even ones that I put forth, and I think I cracked this through a lot of research and a lot of time studying just different papers and historic accounts from people that may have even witnessed the magic that was being done to shape these stones this way. Some of the Spanish explorers that ran into at Sacsayhuaman, the ancient Peru stone fortress where these blocks are famously look like they're melted together. But you could see the same construction method all over the world. And remember, guys, the devil is always in the details. These rocks are always made out of some kind of igneous or metamorphic stone that contained a ton of glass or silicates. Either it be limestone, andesite, dolomite, granite, different quartzites like the sarsen stones. But they always were some kind of rock containing large amounts of glass. And there is an acid out there that will readily soften and eat through glass. And it could have been readily made by many of these ancient groups just from the wastewater and waste products of their early mining activities. Yeah, we're going to talk about what I think is the best theory that explains this lost technique of the polygonal cycloptic megalithic masonry. And I think it could even help give us a time period of when maybe this type of construction technique was first utilized and then spread out all over. And it coincides, I believe, with the discovery of metal and mining ores on a more industrial level. So I think it coincides a lot with the early Copper Age and the beaker culture. That brought the idea of a knowledge of metalworking and spread it out through ancient England, where they were, which was called Tintagel back then, or the island of tin. It's where all the tin, most of it came from during the Bronze Age. And then you had, Sardinia, little islands out in the Mediterranean that were loaded with copper, Cyprus. That's the ancient word for copper is Cyprus. So. Anyway, I want to talk about what I think is the best theory that explains how they did this. I think it answers it 100%. It's not even my idea. It was proposed already in papers. I'm having a hard time finding the paper where this was proposed. Forgive me, but I thought of this idea. I've had this notion before that paper was even published. Because for a long time, looking at a lot of these constructions, my mind just went to geopolymer, some advanced form of concrete made out of granites or andesites, or somehow they rotted the stone, turned it to liquid. But it's sort of a hybrid idea that combines those. Because if you look at any of these ancient stone walls, being a stone tool person and being into that efficacy and being able to identify stone tool and stone tool work, or just hand on stone work, even if it was primitive copper chisels, because copper is softer than the corundum. So you'd rather have a corundum tool than a copper one, honestly, if you're working with some of these harder stones. Literally, I'm pretty sure that if you look closely at any of these megalithic structures, you'll see all the pitting and all of the pecking marks from hand work. And you'd be surprised with what you could get done with a large workforce that was all pushed in the same common direction and same common goal. We don't experience that in our modern world ever. We don't know what extreme labor forces. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people working on one task, what the power of that actually looks like. But it could move mountains, I assume. And with some crazy ingenuity, I think the ancient Spanish chroniclers that came across the Peruvian fort at Sacsayhuaman, I think it's like Wall of the Hawk or Place of the Hawk or something. I forget the exact translation of that. I think they said they made a concoction out of magical plants that turned the stone to liquid. And I think they wrote down exactly what they witnessed, and I think I know exactly what they made this magic stone melting liquid out of. And we're going to talk about that going forward in this video. That's just a little intro. Here's some gemstones, guys. Oh, we got some blue sheen sapphire. We got a beautiful greenish blue sapphire down here. Beautiful yellow sapphire. Could have been even a hammer or tool, possibly. More beautiful blue sapphire here. Blue sapphire. Clear sapphire. Always forms these very boxy, elongated shapes. Tortoiseshell sapphire. Just all kinds. Sapphire scrapers, sapphire spearheads, sapphire pressure tool, possible chisel. And we get a lot of chisel-like tools. Unfortunately, I can't move all this stuff off of here right now. A lot of them are under that in there. But they're corundum, dark brown corundum, long chisels and tools. Similar to what you would find in a metalworking with like a copper chisel, but they just copied the same form of tool. Like look, like this is literally a hammer made out of yellow sapphire. It's composite. It would have went into a branch or a large stick for leverage, and this would have been great for pecking down those large monuments. It's great for cutting through the large monuments. There's a ton of cutters and blades made out of this corundum, and like large hand tools made out of this corundum. Like, this stuff is just under diamond, but you can smack it way harder than a diamond and it's not going to break. More corundum saws made out of aluminum oxide and plumes. All this stuff, I mean, you wouldn't go through the effort of making a stone tool out of abrasion that would take forever to work into shape if you weren't using it for a purpose. This stuff is so hard, it would have been the most effective stuff at cutting through other stone and rock. And I think, you know, as these quarry sites were reused by people that came after the people that were building these monuments, and I can't date this, I can only put my theory out there. I think it's probably around 6,000 to 8,000 years old, all the way up to possibly 2000 BC. But I don't think any of that culture was around from 2000 forward, because it wasn't written about or chronicled about by any of the early colonial people, early European fur trappers. It's not in the native folklore. The native folklore explains of like early visitors like Vikings. They would call them ironclads, or like these ironclad giants, or these giants that wore metal, or they called them stoneclad, giants that wore vests made out of stone, but they're depicting some kind of ancient armor from the Dark Ages. Well, I am a believer of diffusionalism, so I never look at the oceans as borders. I think they were traveled across way longer. I think even Neanderthals had the ability to get across oceans. So I think ancient humanity, even going back 100 to 200,000 years, was well more diverse and global than we're giving it credit for. I can absolutely not get behind the whole 13,000 years was the earliest human in America. That's just totally disproven. These 3 points disprove that model right there. These 3-point designs replicate the 3-point designs that existed before fluting and the Clovis culture even happened. You have a keel haul, that was flaked on one side, so unifacially flaked, which is a Solutrean style, very triangular, before the stem was even created. You have this super early proto stem where they're just starting to get stems on it, and it's just flaked on one side, unifacially. This is bifacially flaked, and it's keel-hauled. You're starting to get more of a Clovis pattern, but this is all prior to Clovis times. And if you want to research something, guys, you can look up the Meadowcroft site in PA, where they found and dated ones very similar to this, and they date back to 17 to 20,000 years ago, right in that Solutrean window. They were the guys building these little real triangular ones too, probably. But because this corundum was quarried and all over the place, I think it was reutilized by these ancient people that were looking for copper mainly, and ore and different resources. Like I said, the area of the Pennypack where those megaliths are, the whole area is named, all the ancient place names. It's Welsh Road. They're all Hillcroft, Byberry, Edge. These are all Welsh place names. Even the old farms from the 1600s, a lot of those have Welsh connections back through there. It even looks like Wales along stretches. So you just have to wonder, like, how deep is that ancient connection? And with our paradigms and with land claims, we would certainly want to erase any knowledge of these or these Bronze Age cultures. Even evidence that ancient Chinese explorers made it to the west coast with the stone anchors, and there's literally a Great Wall out in California. There's a Great Wall, just like there is in China, that no one really talks about up in the hills of Hollywood. So, but anyways, that's enough of spinning out onto a tangent. And the video should settle down and become less Blair Witchy style. Anyways, again, please subscribe. If you're not a member yet, please become a member. And we'll just keep exploring together. Happy Lost Souls consists of this crazy research in ancient cultures based on this crazy collection found in northeast Pennsylvania, or southeast Pennsylvania, I should say, over the last 12 to 15 years. And of course, the channel is growing, just like how we found those megaliths. That was somebody that reached out that was noticing, wow, a lot of other weird stuff happening along the same creek where all these crazy artifacts are found. But anyways, stay tuned for the rest of the video, where I kind of get into discussing this theory about how they made the stones shape this way, cut the stones, and place them together where it almost looks like they're melted in these random polygonal shapes. Which, by the way, building a wall that way makes it almost indestructible from earthquakes and from cataclysm. I think the walls were way older than the Spanish say that the people of the area were building them, or actually weren't building them, but they were making renovations or repairs on them and adding stones to places where maybe one has fallen. But they were able to observe the technique with these magic plants and this magic chemical or concoction of some sort that they were using to melt or soften these stones. And I will explain later in this video how that is probably the most plausible answer to this mystery. Anyways, stay tuned. Love you all. Please subscribe. Hey, all you happy lost souls. Again, thanks for tuning in. This video is going to go through some of my theories on these megalithic, cyclopic, polygonal megalithic masonry that we see in these crazy walls, like at Sacsayhuaman, or in Greece, or in Japan, or in Russia, or in Mongolia, or in Montana, or in parts of the Siberia, all over the world. Ancient England, Scotland, Doggerland, all across France and Germany, the ancient time period of the megalithic constructions. And also, we find some megalithic structures that have fallen over and are still in place along the Pennypack, where we find all these crazy sapphire artifacts. In the video prior to this, you can check out the mystery megalithic blocks of southeastern Pennsylvania. What you're going to see is a series of different pictures of different walls and megalithic, polygonal, and cycloptic masonry found throughout the whole world. And it's similar, identical in its design and construction. So this is either a shared knowledge or shared skill that was part of some global past maritime empire that probably could build boats real well and developed a lot of maritime and trading cities along coastlines all over the world. And I believe this started to occur right when humans began to shift out of the Neolithic, out of the New Stone Age, into the Copper and Bronze Age, into working, making metal. It started with the beaker culture, beaker and bell-bot culture in England. We find some of their artifacts. They brought metalworking over to Ireland. But anyways, how did they do this? It's not aliens. It's not polygonal mason. It is polygonal masonry, but it's not geopolymers or advanced cements. It is not laser beams. It is not advanced electrical cutting wheels. It's none of that, but it is something that is very, very clever, and it was overlooked. Now, I've been thinking about this theory for a long time. There's been some papers putting this theory forward, but I think it's the one that fits everything. It fits the anthropology, it fits the archaeology. When the Spanish were moving through Peru in the 1500s, they came across the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, or the fortress of the Falcon. This ancient Inca structure that the Incas said that they didn't build, but was there, but they were adding on and repairing parts of it when the Spanish passed through. And the Spanish chroniclers observed a very curious thing. The shaman, or the spiritual leaders of this large workforce fixing and repairing these massive structures and walls, they would mix together fire and plants and this weird reddish liquid and make a paste. This is written down, and this paste would be rubbed all over the stones, and it would sit for a while, and it would literally disintegrate and eat through the rock, turning it to mush, at least the first couple inches. It would then be scraped off and shaped and molded with harder tools like bronze or copper tools, or even harder stone tools, which is what I think all of these sapphire and corundum and andesite and different granite tools that we find along the Pennypack were used for. I think they were for stoneworking. I think some of the chisels and some of the wedges made of corundum were for splitting these large megalithic boulders from their bedrock or from their quarry sites. Now, I'll tell you that for a while I was under the belief that a lot of these ancient sites were made out of advanced geopolymers or advanced cements or concretes. It is possible to rot down granite and andesites and create liquid stone out of them, but this is not what happened at these sites. These sites, the stone was tested. The place from where they were quarried at is known. And cross sections and geological testing with mass spectrometer, FRX, all different types of things have been applied to these sites, and they're quarried stone. Now, there are certain types of stone. This is where the devil is in the detail. It's very important. All the stones used in these crazy megalithic structures and walls were all some sort of igneous containing stone or silicate containing stone. They were either types of limestone, types of granite, types of andesite, dolomite, different types of igneous or metamorphic rock that contained tons of glass and metals. Now, this building style started to appear right alongside of early Bronze Age cultures. And what happened is we have a lot of copper mining, and you'll see some images of some wastewater from ancient copper mines in Cyprus and even some in the United States, more modern mining. The byproduct from all of this, copper hides out with tons of sulfates. So all of this mining strips all of the sulfates out of the rock into the water and into all the runoff, and you get lakes, these red glowing lakes, orange lakes of pretty much sulfuric acid. Essentially, it's dilute sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid will eat through plastics. It'll eat through like clothing and skin and things like that, but it will not eat glass or rock. But there is an acid that is extremely good at eating glass and rock, primarily glass. I think even Breaking Bad touched on this, but it's something called hydrofluoric acid. And hydrofluoric acid can be easily obtained from adding a couple things to sulfuric acid or to the wastewater from these ancient copper mines. So you take the wastewater, you heat it up to a temperature between 260 and 300 degrees, and then you add plants containing high levels of fluoride. And these plants will be growing right around these wastewater bogs, plants that can be found worldwide along these sites, such as pennyroyal. These plants contain 4 to 8% fluoride content, and when heated up and mixed in to this red wastewater, a thick red hydrofluoric acid solution or paste was created, mixing these few elements that were readily abundant nearby to all of these sites together. And you can see with your own eyes that most of these quarried stones, they were all faced, and all of like the detailed work was done by thousands and thousands of hours of hand pecking, either with harder stone hammers, like, dare we say, corundum or andesite type hammers, dolomite type hammers, or even really early bronze or copper type tools used at these sites. I think this ties everything together. The very people that witnessed the Incas repairing their walls, I think they remembered the technique for shaping the stones, but they were working with much smaller stones at the time the Spanish got here, because they were doing repairs on top of the giant megalithic walls underneath. And you can see that in some of the pictures. I circled some of the newer construction sitting on top of the older, and it's this way all over the world. The older stuff is bigger, more advanced, the skill level is way higher, and it starts degrading and getting smaller as we move forward in time. You would think it would be the opposite. Obviously, this is something that was lost to our knowledge or understanding, but I think this best explains how these stones look like they were melted and shaped almost like they were turned into a soft, pliable putty and then shaped and then rehardened. And I believe trace amounts of this red paste can still be found on some of these stones. I think they're testing, and I know there's some scientific papers out there putting this theory forward. I don't know how long these people have been working on the research, but I've been under the same mindset that it was some sort of acid or some kind of corrosive chemical once I started understanding that although all of these structures are made out of hard quarried bedrock, they're always hard quarried bedrock that were brought from quarries way further away when they could have used a different stone that was closer. They selected these stones on purpose because they knew that that paste that they were making would only eat through certain rocks. It wouldn't eat through sedimentary rocks. It would eat through metals as easy, but it would eat through silicates and any rock that was primarily glass. Limestone is silicate. So is quartz. It's literally natural glass, types of natural glass. And hydrofluoric acid will turn that into mush. So I believe they coated the stones and outlined the shape and kind of heaped this paste all over, kept it on there for hours or maybe a day or so, let it soften through a couple, first couple layers and inches of the stone, and then you scrape it off almost like a putty. You can almost round it off into the crevices, and using the actual dissolved, melted, rotten stone as your mortar, thus it would just harden back up and look like it was part of the stone again. It's the same reason I think you get a lot of these nodules and on certain rocks in certain areas. I think that's how far down the acid melted, and they left the original surface area up on some of the stones simply to measure, to lay out the wall as a measuring point to lay other stones down. And mostly all these megalithic walls, the front-facing stones look gorgeous, and they're leaned back a bit, but the supporting stones behind it that fill out the rest of the thickness of the wall are usually not nearly as precise, and they don't look nearly as well or nearly as good. It's like they put the best facing side outwards so everyone could see it. Kind of like when we put a fence up, we put the crappy side of the fence facing us, the nice side facing out. So we want everyone to see the nice side. That's kind of how these were constructed. But I definitely think the red paste, hydrofluoric acid paste, is a method that was used globally in order to shape these stones. I think they were rough quarried into the shape that they roughly needed to fit the spot in the wall, carved out slightly larger than needed, and then brought to the site where they were worked down smaller into their official shape, and then add it to the structure, to the wall. And why you build a wall using this crazy technique is because they never fall down. When you have this cycloptic polygonal masonry with all these random shapes fitting together perfectly at different levels, it becomes impervious to shaking, to earthquakes. It becomes almost air water tight. It wouldn't get washed away in floods or disasters. It almost seems like the whole world at one point knew some crazy catastrophe was about to happen, maybe involving flooding, and they were trying to build fortifications, often high up on hillsides. And I don't even think we found all of them around the world, but I do think this was an ancient culture that had obviously shared ideas and shared technology, erecting similar structures all over the world at the same time. And I believe we uncovered a stone working technique, chemically engineering, or we can call it the green chisel. And that's a theory a name that's been put out there for this theory is called the green chisel theory. But when I see the anthropological evidence lining up with all the anecdotal evidence, lining up with all of the consistencies with these sites globally, what type of material was used to make the wall, how the walls were constructed, and the fact that they all started to spring up right when copper and stuff was being mined, and they had this acidic byproduct all over the place. I think the ancients were extremely efficient at using everything, even their waste they used as a tool. And I think the magic red paste, hydrofluoric acid, stone-eating paste answers this enigma. I think obviously more research is being done, and there's some scientific papers. I had a hard time finding them. They're so new to credit them, but there are some scientific papers out there that are accrediting this. But this theory has been tossed around for a long time. Not so much the exact chemical compound, but because of the eyewitnesses and the Spanish chroniclers saying, hey, we saw them adding stones and repairing, and how they shaped these as they created some liquid that, or some magic paste that turned stones to liquid. And they weren't inaccurate. That's exactly what was doing. And the more inaccurate part is it isn't technically turning the stone to liquid. It's this type of acid just eats and chemically reacts to glass, and you can't even store it in glass containers. But I am 90 to 98.5% sure this was the technique employed to shape the stones this way and to give them that melted, unnatural looking appearance. There are other methods you can use to achieve that look, but I don't think they're methods that we can say apply to it. I don't think the stones were melted because I could see all the pecking on the facing. I could see all the hand pecking. I'm a trained stone tool guy in archaeology. I know what hand tools on a big boulder, I know the result of how that looks. And when something is, filed down with high-powered spinning abrasion tools, or when something was hammered and face down with either primitive copper or stone chisels. And I think the corundum chisels were better than the metals they were producing. And the areas in which, even in my area where we find these megaliths in Pennsylvania, they're areas where tons of mining activity. They're around copper, tin, they're around gold and silver mines, even to this day, where those ancient stones that we found in the Pennypack are quarried. They sit in between a huge geological uptick of all kinds of metals. I even think that part of the bridge holding up the railroad track down that way was a much older megalithic construction that the settlers just reused as a support for a bridge. So it could have been a blast furnace, or it could have been a huge mechanism in the middle of the creek where ancient boats could have gone up to and used as a crane or lifting mechanism to move some of the ore and materials out that fueled the Bronze Age. Like, we still don't know where all the copper came from. And a lot of the scientific metallurgy, the fingerprint done of a lot of the Bronze Age metals have a super, almost identical fingerprint to the ultra pure copper found in the Great Lake regions. And the sheer amount of ore and material that was removed from the Great Lakes 6,000, 8,000 years ago, not even close to be accounted by the natives. The natives were using the pure copper. They weren't really smelting it, but the copper up there is so pure they could just hammer it, cold hammer the copper out of the ground into tools and things like that. But literally thousands and thousands of tons were removed up there, and nowhere do we find thousands and thousands of bronze or copper artifacts in the Native American catalog. Now, some of it, I believe, was being exported down to South America because I think the Mayans, the Olmecs, they had a much vaster, spread out empire that went all the way up to the Great Lakes, all the way down through the East Coast. I think it was all under Mayan, or this unified trade mechanism, like where it met up at the mound cities in Gahotia. I think that was the meeting place between the strong tribes and the tribes that ruled the southern area of the United States, and with the tribal groups that owned or ran the northern part. I think they were confederacies, and they met at this huge global trading post that has a ton of Mayan influences, Gahota, which that fell around 500 to 1,000. It fell around the same time the Mayans fell, so there's a lot of correlation. There's some kind of relation between those groups. Anyways, I digressed a bit. I hope you all enjoy the video. Please subscribe. Please be a member for $1.99. There's some content up there that you can only view as a member. I have a whole book. It's a fictional story, but there's tons of non-fictional information. It's about the Pennypack, but it's kind of like a Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer type story, but with a darker, ghostlier twist to it. You can check out that whole audiobook. It's laid out by chapter. It's only available to members. But as the members grow and the paid memberships grow, there's going to be more and more content, and there's going to be a greater chance to have one-on-one interactions. But there's not enough members yet to push that forward, other than having some content over there, some stickers, your own badge you can pick out. But membership starts at $1.99, and if you're an early member, that'll never be forgotten moving forward. So please subscribe. If you're really feeling audacious, please become a member, starting at $1.99. Also have some merchandise if you go over to the community tab. But please subscribe, comment, like. That helps the algorithm. And as the channel grows and the funding kind of grows, some of it's going to be donated back to the water. Others is going to be in pushing the business and the research forward. So anyways, thanks again. If you enjoy mysterious conversations on ancient peoples of America and theories and philosophy, poetry and music, free of politics and free of the stress of all that BS and cliques and groups, and a place where you can just have an open mind and put forth whatever ideas that you have without being ridiculed, go for it. I can't tell you how many times, my friends, that I've taken things to people who claim to be professionals and they laugh at you or they try to belittle you or degrade you. But I know what I'm looking at. I'm trained. I went to school for it. So I won't be bullied or pushed aside or gaslit by anybody that's protecting a paradigm or a gatekeeper of any kind. It is the age of truth. We're moving into the age of enlightenment, and we're going to start finding answers, and we're going to start to see that there was some sort of global advanced culture that we have amnesia and that we have forgotten about prior to that last flood. And the ideas, building styles, construction techniques, they were similar globally around the world. These ideas were being transmitted. So unless you're willing to say at every continent that humanity inhabited back during this time period in between the Neolithic going into the Bronze Age, when they started building these megalithic sites and all that, you're telling me that everyone across the globe all decided to build in the same way, the same stuff, the same shapes, the same structures, the same astronomical alignments, the same polygonal masonry, the same smooth melted looking techniques of advanced stonework of gigantic proportion. And as you see, after the destruction of this empire, after this cataclysm happened, you see these same sites with newer things built on top of, using smaller, less effective, less efficient masonry, not even close to the advanced masonry techniques they had in ancient times. But I hope that this video and this theory helps to possibly solve this conundrum. I think that this is a easy enough thing to recreate tests on. I think experimental archaeology could do a wonder in this area. Certain concoctions, certain mixtures, see what eats through the stone the best. And I'm sure that they discovered this accidentally as they were mining tons of copper. They must have observed what this acid could do and as it ate through stone. And there must have been a time either when they were heat treating or when fire and plant got exposed to this and it created a different chemical, and they started seeing this crazy fizz and steam come off when they added this paste to glass, and this chemical reaction occurred from the hydrofluoric acid eating through the glass and the silicates. Anyways, I think the magic red paste is how these crazy megaliths like Sacsayhuaman and Greece and Italy and Japan and India and all across Europe and all across Mongolia and ancient Asia, all across Russia, all across the Arctic, all across, even now they're finding the same polygonal techniques up at places in Montana, up near the Great Lakes. They look like they're giant locks to maybe filter water. Could have been to filter melting ice water from the ice sheets during the last ice age. Interestingly enough, these megaliths are right on the trail that would have been taken by ancient man crossing over the land bridge, the Beringian land passage during the last ice age. The only gap between the mountains would take you down through Montana, right past these huge megalithic walls. Some of them are definitely megalithic walls. Some of them are simply geological features that grow a lot like a walls, like different granite slabs and formations will. Limestone formations can tend to look like giant bricks, but that's just a formation they kind of grow in. It looks like in these cases they use some of these natural formations and then add it on their own megalithic walls to extend these ranges or these flow sites or these channel sites. So who knows, but they're all up and down the east coast of the United States. They just these chambers, dolums, cairns, standing rings, circles, this very Celtic, proto-Celtic style of building, this megalithic style that shouldn't even be in America really, but we find it all over South America, so there's no reason we wouldn't find it all around up here. Anyways, again, please subscribe. Thanks a lot. I love you all. Peace. Stay safe.